I didn't mean to overhear her. Honestly, I was just trying to figure out how to use the new security system I installed last weekend. The manual was a nightmare, pages of jargon and confusing diagrams. So I decided to test the audio features by syncing it with my phone. That's when it happened. Kate was in the kitchen. I could hear the faint clinking of dishes, followed by her voice, sharp, focused. At first, I thought she was talking to one of her friends. But the tone was different, colder. And then I heard another voice. A man's. Jake, her coworker. The name she casually dropped in conversations, as if he was just another guy from the office. "We need to stick to the plan," Jake said. His voice sent a chill down my spine. "The plan only works because Albert is so predictable," Kate replied. I froze. My phone almost slipped out of my hand. "They were talking about me." Jake laughed. "You're sure he'll react like you said?" "Oh, trust me. Albert's like clockwork. He'll lose it, and that's when we'll strike." I couldn't breathe. They weren't just talking about me, they were plotting against me. My wife of 12 years, the mother of my 2 kids, was planning to destroy me. Take the house, the kids, the money. Everything. Kate's voice was venomous, dripping with resentment I didn't even know existed. "Once he blows up, I'll file the restraining order. Then it's just a matter of time before I have full custody." Jake chuckled, low and confident. "And the bank accounts?" "Already in motion," she said, so casually it made me sick. I felt like the walls were closing in. Every word sliced me open, and I couldn't even move. This was my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. My mind reeled as I stood there in the dark hallway, clutching my phone. How long had she been planning this? How long had I been blind to it? And what was I supposed to do now? I sat in my car in the driveway, replaying their conversation over and over. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely keep hold of my phone. The betrayal was one thing. The cold, calculated way she spoke about me? That was something else. It wasn't just a bad decision or a heated moment. This was a plan, a long, deliberate plan. The kids were at school, so I had time to think without worrying about them walking in on me like this. My first instinct was to storm into the house and confront her. But then her words echoed in my head. "Once he blows up, I'll file the restraining order." She was counting on me to react. She knew me too well. I couldn't give her the satisfaction of being right. Instead, I tried to think back. Were there signs I missed? Moments when she showed me who she really was, and I just ignored it? There was the time she started stepping outside to take phone calls, always in the backyard, where she thought no one could hear. I'd ask who it was, and she'd laugh it off. "Work stuff," she'd say. I'd roll my eyes and move on. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? I trusted her. Then there were the sudden arguments over nothing. Like last month, when she exploded because I left a dirty mug in the sink. The look in her eyes wasn't just anger, it was contempt. Back then, I thought she was just stressed. I even apologized, thinking maybe I wasn't pulling my weight at home. Now I wasn't so sure. And Jake. Of course, Jake. I remember the first time she mentioned him, how funny he was, how he got her sense of humor. I didn't think much of it. Everyone has work friends, right? But then she started talking about him more. His promotion, his divorce, his bad luck with women. I should have known. God, I should have known. As I sat there piecing it all together, the anger bubbled up, hot and sharp. But beneath the rage was something else. Fear. If she was willing to go this far, to scheme with Jake, to manipulate the law, what else was she capable of? I didn't want to find out the hard way. I needed a plan of my own. I went back into the house like nothing had happened. My face felt like it was burning, but I forced myself to stay calm. Kate was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, looking as casual as ever. I couldn't believe how normal she looked. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was a stranger sitting in my home, plotting to rip my life apart. "Hey," she said without even looking up. "You okay? You've been out there for a while." I swallowed hard. "Just needed a minute to clear my head," I said, grabbing a glass of water to keep my hands busy. Her voice didn't waver, not even a hint of guilt. If anything, she seemed more relaxed than usual. "The kids have soccer later. Can you take them? I've got to stay late at work again." Work. I almost laughed. I wondered how many of her late nights had actually been with Jake, going over their little plan. But I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, I can take care of it. Thanks, hon, she said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek as she walked past me. The kiss felt cold, like a formality. Once she left the room, I grabbed my phone and started digging. I needed to see if there was more proof. Something concrete. If she and Jake were this bold in person, they had to have left a trail somewhere. I logged into our shared laptop. The browser history was clear, too clear. But when I checked the recycling bin, I found a few deleted files. One was a copy of her bank statement. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. But then I noticed a monthly withdrawal labeled Capital Alliance. I didn't recognize it, and it wasn't something we'd ever talked about. I typed the name into Google, and my stomach dropped. It was a legal firm specializing in family law, divorces, custody battles, asset division. The last withdrawal? 2 weeks ago. This wasn't just a scheme she and Jake cooked up in some drunken moment of anger. She'd been planning this for months. I knew I couldn't just sit on this information. If she was preparing to take me to court, I needed to be 10 steps ahead. My first call was to a lawyer, someone I trusted from way back when I needed help with a property dispute. After explaining everything, he didn't sugarcoat it. You're in a tough spot, Albert, he said. If she's already got a firm on retainer, she's preparing for a fight. And with custody involved, the courts don't care about who's morally right. They care about what looks best for the kids. What do I do? I asked, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to sound composed. Start documenting everything. Every argument, every interaction. Get your financial records in order, and make sure she can't access anything she shouldn't. And whatever you do, don't confront her without legal advice. If she's trying to paint you as unstable, blowing up at her will only play into her hands. It was good advice, but it didn't make me feel any better. Kate was one step ahead of me at every turn, and I was scrambling to catch up. When the kids got home, I felt like I was watching them through a glass wall, like they were part of some life I didn't recognize anymore. My son, Ethan, was so excited to tell me about the goal he scored during recess. My daughter, Lily, was showing me a drawing she made at art class. And then there was Kate, sitting on the couch, scrolling on her phone like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't planning to rip us all apart. The kids' laughter echoed through the house as we played in the backyard that evening. Ethan was kicking the soccer ball toward me with everything he had, shouting that he'd be the next Messi, while Lily sat on the porch, lost in her drawings. To anyone passing by, it would have looked like the picture of a happy family. But my chest felt like it was about to cave in. I could still hear Kate's voice from earlier, cold and calculating, as if she hadn't just tried to dismantle everything I'd built. Inside, Kate sat on the couch with her wine, scrolling on her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her face calm and indifferent. Dinner will be ready in 20, she said, not even bothering to meet my eyes for long. I forced a nod, not trusting myself to speak. The rage bubbling under the surface was nearly unbearable, but I couldn't afford to give her a reason to start her plan early. She wanted me to blow up. She was counting on it. Instead, I excused myself to the garage. There, under the flickering fluorescent light, I turned on my laptop. I needed answers. Her betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. She had been planning this, and I needed to find out how deep it went. My hands shook as I logged into our joint bank account. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. But then I noticed it, a $10,000 withdrawal labeled personal reserve. It was from a month ago, and I had no idea where that money went. My heart pounded as I clicked further, scanning for anything unusual. Then I found it, a recurring $1,200 payment to something called Northwood Wellness Center. I didn't recognize it, but a quick search told me all I needed to know. It wasn't a gym or medical clinic, it was a luxury spa retreat. Couples massages. Private suites. Candlelit dinners. My stomach churned as I stared at the screen, the realization settling in like a punch to the gut. The dates matched perfectly. The nights she claimed to be working late, the weekend she said she was visiting her mother, they weren't coincidences. She was at the spa, spending our money on romantic getaways with Jake. I slammed the laptop shut, taking a few deep breaths to steady myself. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was using our shared life, our resources, to fund her betrayal. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. Not without a plan. She was already prepared to paint me as the unhinged, unpredictable husband. I couldn't afford to lose control. The next day, I called my lawyer again. She's draining our accounts, I said, explaining the transactions. And I've got evidence of an affair. That's a good start, he replied, but his tone was cautious. If custody's involved, the affair alone won't carry much weight. Courts prioritize stability for the kids. You'll need more than just proof of infidelity. You'll need something that shows she's unfit or manipulative. What about the recording from the security system? I asked. He paused. Potentially helpful, but it's tricky. If she claims you recorded her without consent, it could backfire. Gather everything you can, bank records, texts, anything that shows a pattern of deception. But don't confront her yet. Stay calm, and stay smart. That night, while Kate tucked the kids into bed, I sat at the dining table, going over the next steps. I wrote down every odd behavior I could remember, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained expenses, the sudden hostility over trivial things. I created a timeline, making connections between her lies and the evidence I'd uncovered. But I needed more. Something solid. The next morning, after she left for work, I called a private investigator. His name was Marcus, and he came highly recommended by my lawyer. We met at a coffee shop across town, where I laid it all out for him, the overheard conversation, the financial discrepancies, and the spa trips with Jake. Marcus nodded as he took notes. She's playing a long game, he said. But if she's gotten this comfortable, chances are she's left a trail. I'll find it. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, knowing someone was in my corner. Anxiety, knowing the storm that was coming. And sadness, because the woman I'd shared my life with wasn't the person I thought she was. When I walked into the house, Kate greeted me with a smile that almost made me laugh. How many times had I trusted that smile? How many lies had it hidden? "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice casual. I forced myself to smile back. "Yeah," I said. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. And soon, she'd find out just how far I was willing to go to protect what mattered most. The days dragged on like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Kate moved through the house with her usual calm, sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone, and laughing at jokes the kids told her. She looked like the same woman I married, but now, every smile felt like a mask hiding the cold, calculated person I'd overheard plotting to dismantle my life. I stayed quiet, playing along like nothing had changed, but inside, I was scrambling. Marcus, the private investigator, called a few days later. "You were right," he said. "It's not just an affair. She and Jake have been meeting regularly, and I've got photos of them at a hotel, the spa, and even at a restaurant downtown." Hearing those words felt like swallowing glass. But he wasn't finished. "There's something else," he added. "She's been moving money into a private account. Small amounts, but they've added up to a significant sum. She's building a financial cushion, likely to use against you." I gripped the phone so hard I thought it might crack. "Keep digging," I said. "I need everything." The evidence was piling up, but I knew it wouldn't be enough on its own. My lawyer was clear about that when I met him the next day. "Courts care about the kids first," he explained. "We need to show that she's not just unfaithful, but unstable or manipulative. This evidence is a good start, but we need witnesses, people who can back you up." The thought of dragging someone else into this mess made my stomach churn, but I knew he was right. That evening, I called Tom, my best friend since college. I hadn't told him anything yet. I wasn't ready to face his reaction. But I couldn't do this alone anymore. When I finally finished explaining, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Albert," he said, his voice heavy with disbelief, "this is unreal. But if you need me, I'm here. Just tell me what to do." I hung up feeling a little less alone. Tom promised to help in any way he could, even if it meant testifying in court. Knowing he had my back gave me a small sense of relief, but it also made everything feel more real. This wasn't just something I could ignore or hope would fix itself. This was a war, and I had to be ready. 2 nights later, Kate made her first big mistake. She left her phone on the counter while she went to take a shower. I wasn't planning to snoop, but when it buzzed, I couldn't help but glance at the screen. It was a text from Jake. "Everything's set. Let me know when you're ready to pull the trigger." My blood ran cold. Pull the trigger? What did that mean? I grabbed my own phone and snapped a picture of the screen before she could come back. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Whatever they were planning, It wasn't just about leaving me. It was about taking everything. My home, my kids, my dignity. They were plotting to strip me of everything that mattered. The next morning, I called Marcus again. I need you to figure out what that text meant, I said. Consider it done, he replied. Now, it was a waiting game. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I had to stay calm, stay smart, and stay one step ahead. But inside, the storm was already raging. And I knew it was only a matter of time before it broke. I walked through the house the next few days like I was on autopilot, pretending everything was fine while the knot in my stomach grew tighter. Kate seemed oblivious, humming to herself while folding laundry or chatting with the kids. I wondered if she felt a shred of guilt or if her plan with Jake gave her some sick sense of satisfaction. I kept my phone close, waiting for an update from Marcus. When it finally came, I wasn't prepared for what he had to say. They're getting ready to file, Marcus said bluntly. The text from Jake? It's about timing. They've got paperwork drawn up, divorce filings, custody claims, and even a restraining order. If you so much as raise your voice to her, they'll use it against you. It felt like someone had sucker punched me. A restraining order? I asked, my voice cracking. Yeah. They're banking on you snapping, Albert. The more unpredictable you seem, the easier it'll be to paint you as a danger to the kids. I clenched the phone so tightly my hand hurt. What else do you have? Marcus hesitated. I've also found some shady financial moves. It looks like Jake has been helping her stash money into offshore accounts. If she pushes for a financial settlement, you could lose more than just the house. I hung up the phone, my mind spinning. They weren't just trying to break me emotionally, they were planning to leave me with nothing. That night, I went through our bedroom like a man possessed, searching for anything else Kate might have hidden. I checked her drawers, her jewelry box, even her suitcase. In the back of her closet, I found a folder stuffed under a pile of old sweaters. Inside were printed emails between her and Jake, discussing how to handle me. The language was clinical, like I was some obstacle they needed to remove. They mentioned potential strategies, triggering arguments, keeping records of my reactions, and documenting any mistakes I made with the kids. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. At the very bottom of the stack was a mock custody agreement. It outlined everything she wanted: sole custody of Ethan and Lily, the house, and a hefty share of my income. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the papers. I thought about Ethan's laugh when he scored a goal in the backyard. I thought about Lily proudly showing me her latest drawing. And then I thought about the look on their faces if I wasn't there to pick them up from school or help them with their homework. No. I wasn't going to let that happen. The next morning, I met with my lawyer again. I found these, I said, handing him the folder. He scanned the documents, his eyebrows furrowing. This is bad, he admitted. But it's also good. These emails show intent, premeditation. She's not just filing for divorce, she's trying to manipulate the system to her advantage. Judges don't look kindly on that. What do I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You need to stay calm, he said firmly. Let her play her hand first. The more aggressive she gets, the more it'll work against her. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. And if she tries to provoke you, walk away. Every time. That night, Kate brought up the idea of a family trip, something to reconnect, she said, with that same practiced smile. I nodded, playing along, even though I knew exactly what she was doing. As we sat at the dinner table, she reached across to place her hand on mine. I know we've been a little off lately, she said softly. But I think this trip could help us get back on track. My stomach churned at her touch, but I kept my face neutral. That sounds nice, I said, lying through my teeth. The kids beamed, already talking about all the places they wanted to go. I smiled at them, trying to keep my focus on their excitement instead of the storm brewing between Kate and me. Later that night, when she was asleep, I texted Marcus. Any chance you can dig into the vacation idea? Something doesn't feel right. On it, he replied. The walls were closing in, but I was done being a victim. Kate wanted to play games? Fine. I'd let her. But I was going to make sure that when the time came, I'd be the one holding all the cards the next morning. I woke up to Marcus's update waiting in my inbox. His message was short but confirmed what I already suspected. The vacation is a setup. She booked it under your name but listed Jake as an additional guest. If you go and she stirs the pot, she could use it as leverage, claim you reacted poorly or made the environment unsafe for the kids. Be cautious. Don't take the bait. I stared at the email for a long time, my heart pounding in my chest. Kate wasn't just trying to manipulate me, she was trying to create a picture of me as the unstable husband and father she needed me to be for her plan to work. I decided to cancel the trip, but I needed to make sure my reasoning was solid and defensible. That evening, when Kate brought it up again, I calmly told her that work had picked up unexpectedly and I couldn't justify taking time off. Her face tightened for just a moment before she forced a smile. "It's fine," she said lightly. "We'll find another time." But I saw the flicker of irritation behind her eyes. I hadn't reacted the way she wanted, and that gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Over the next week, I doubled down on my preparations. I worked late hours at the office, not because I needed to, but because it kept me out of the house. The less time I spent around Kate, the less chance I'd give her to provoke me. At home, I kept things cordial but distant. I didn't engage in any arguments, even when she started nitpicking small things like how I loaded the dishwasher or forgot to replace the toothpaste. The kids noticed the tension though. One night, while I was tucking Ethan into bed, he asked, "Dad, are you mad at Mom?" His question hit me like a punch to the gut. I ruffled his hair and gave him a small smile. "No, buddy. Mom and I are just figuring some things out. It's nothing you need to worry about." He nodded, but the worry in his eyes didn't fade. As I left his room, I made a silent vow. Whatever happened between Kate and me, I wasn't going to let it destroy Ethan and Lily's sense of security. The next day, I got another call from Marcus. "I've got something big," he said. "Tell me," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "There's a financial paper trail linking Jake to an offshore account. It looks like they've been funneling money into it from both your accounts, yours and hers. She's not just taking what's hers, Albert. She's taking what's yours too." The air left my lungs. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Marcus replied. "I'm sending you everything I've found. This isn't just a divorce case anymore. If you want, you can take this to the authorities." I hung up, my hands shaking. This was the proof I needed, the smoking gun that showed Kate's betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. That night, I met with my lawyer again. He went through the files Marcus had sent, his expression growing more serious with each passing page. "This changes things," he said finally. "We can use this to challenge her credibility in court. And if we can prove Jake's involvement, it might even lead to charges against them both." "But what about the kids?" I asked. "I don't want them caught in the middle of something ugly." He leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. "The best way to protect them is to stay calm and let the evidence speak for itself. You're doing the right thing, Albert. Keep documenting everything, and don't give her any reason to twist this against you." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The lies, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of what Kate and Jake had done. It was almost too much to bear. But I kept thinking about Ethan and Lily. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure they had a future where they felt safe, where they weren't pawns in their mother's twisted game. Kate wanted a war, but I wasn't going to fight it on her terms. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the right moment to spring it. The tension in the house was unbearable, but I kept my head down and stuck to my plan. Kate was too good at hiding her intentions, smiling at the kids, asking me about my day, and acting like everything was fine. But I could see through her now. Every gesture felt calculated, every word part of a script designed to keep me complacent. I followed my lawyer's advice to the letter. Whenever Kate started an argument, over the laundry, the groceries, or the bills, I stayed calm. I apologized for things I hadn't done wrong, gave her nothing to latch onto, and kept my focus on the kids. She hated it. I could see the frustration flash in her eyes when she couldn't bait me. But it was Lily who made me realize just how deeply this was affecting them. One evening, as I helped her with her spelling homework, she asked, "Daddy, do you and Mommy still love each other?" I froze, the question cutting deeper than I expected. "Of course we do, sweetheart," I said softly, forcing a smile. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, fiddling with her pencil. "You don't laugh as much anymore. And Mommy's been kind of mean lately." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. Sometimes grown-ups have hard days, but that doesn't mean we stop loving each other. Or you and Ethan. She nodded, but her eyes were still clouded with doubt. It killed me to see her like that. I was determined not to let Kate's schemes hurt them any more than they already had. The next morning, Marcus called with another update. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. "She and Jake have been looking into properties in another state. It looks like they're planning to move, maybe even take the kids with them." My stomach dropped. "They can't do that," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "They can't without your consent," Marcus replied. "But that's the thing. Kate's probably planning to use the custody case to get full control. Once she has that, she can go wherever she wants." I felt the anger rising, white-hot and overwhelming. But I knew I couldn't let it consume me. That's what she was counting on. "Can you get proof?" I asked. "Already have," Marcus said. "Email exchanges between her and a real estate agent. I'm sending them to you now." When I showed the emails to my lawyer, his face darkened. "This is huge," he said. "If she's planning to move the kids without your agreement, that's a massive red flag for the court. But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more groundwork she can lay." We filed a motion to prevent Kate from taking the kids out of state without my permission. It felt like a small victory in a war I was still losing, but it was something. That night, Kate must have sensed something was off. As we sat in the living room after the kids went to bed, she looked at me, her expression unusually serious. "Is everything okay, Albert?" I kept my face neutral. Why wouldn't it be? She hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've been distant lately. I don't want us to fall apart." It was almost laughable, hearing her say that after everything she'd done. But I played along. "I've just been busy," I said. "Work's been stressful." She nodded, but I could tell she didn't buy it. The next morning, things came to a head. As I was leaving for work, Kate stopped me at the door. "Albert," she said, her tone sharp. "What's going on? You're hiding something." I turned to her, forcing myself to stay calm. "I could ask you the same thing," I said evenly. Her face flushed, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her mask. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means," I replied, my voice low. "But don't worry, Kate. The truth always comes out." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't say another word as I walked out the door. I drove away, my heart pounding. The game was changing. Kate wasn't as confident as she wanted me to believe, and I was done being her pawn. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, it would be my turn to make a move. After our tense exchange at the door, Kate's behavior shifted. She grew quieter, her eyes lingering on me longer, as if trying to read my thoughts. I could feel her watching, her carefully crafted confidence starting to waver. Marcus called later that afternoon with another update. "She's been making calls to her lawyer almost daily," he said. "It seems like she's trying to accelerate her plans." "Good," I replied. "Let her rush. People make mistakes when they're desperate." At home, I stayed calm but observant. The kids, thankfully, seemed blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. I clung to their laughter and innocence as a reminder of why I had to stay strong. Kate tried to start another argument that evening, nitpicking how I loaded the dishwasher again. But this time, her tone wasn't sharp, it was almost probing, like she was testing me. "You've been distracted," she said, leaning against the counter. "Work's just been busy," I said, meeting her gaze evenly. She held my stare for a moment before shrugging and walking away. But the look in her eyes told me one thing: she knew I was onto her. And she was running out of time. The next morning, Kate caught me off guard. As I was finishing breakfast, she slid into the chair across from me, her expression unusually soft. "Albert, I've been thinking," she said, her voice careful. "Maybe we've both been too tense lately. We could reset things. Try to work through this." I set my coffee cup down, masking my shock. This wasn't an olive branch, it was bait. She was trying to lull me into a false sense of security. "That's something to think about," I said cautiously, keeping my tone neutral. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe we could start by taking that trip. The kids would love it." I nodded slowly, playing along. "I'll check my schedule." As soon as she left the room, I called Marcus. "She's pushing the trip again. Dig deeper. I need to know if this is just manipulation or something worse." Kate was trying to draw me out, to see if I'd slip up. But I wouldn't. Not now. Not when the finish line was so close. Kate's offer to reset things stayed on my mind throughout the day. It felt like a trap, a way to lower my guard, but I couldn't completely dismiss the possibility that she was testing me. If she thought I suspected something, she'd try to control the narrative. That evening, as we sat at the dinner table, she turned on her charm, laughing with the kids and even asking me about my day. It felt forced, like a performance, but it still caught me off balance. "Ethan, tell Dad about your science project," she said brightly, her tone almost too cheerful. Ethan beamed and launched into an explanation about his model volcano. I nodded and smiled, but I could feel Kate's eyes on me, watching for cracks in my facade. Later, after the kids went to bed, she approached me in the living room. "Albert," she said softly, sitting on the arm of the couch. "I know things have been hard between us lately, but I'm serious about wanting to make it better. The trip could be a fresh start." Her voice was calm, measured, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of calculation. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my tone even. She hesitated, then reached for my hand. "I mean it. For the kids, if nothing else." Her touch felt like ice, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I nodded, forcing a small smile. "For the kids," I repeated. The next day, Marcus called again. "You were right to be cautious," he said. "I found more emails between Kate and Jake. They're still planning to push the custody case, and the trip is part of it. If you agree to go, they're planning to use any argument or tension as evidence against you." "What about the financial side?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "That's where it gets interesting," Marcus replied. "Kate's been transferring more money into the offshore account, but now Jake's involved in the transactions. If we can tie this to their affair and the custody case, it could undermine their credibility in court." The pieces were falling into place, but I knew I couldn't act too soon. Kate was still watching me, and any misstep could give her an opening. That evening, she brought up the trip again. "I checked the calendar," she said as we cleaned up after dinner. "We could leave next weekend. I've already talked to the kids, and they're excited." I paused, turning to face her. "Kate, I appreciate the effort, but I don't think a trip is the right move right now. There's a lot to sort out here first." Her smile faltered, and for the first time, I saw frustration flash across her face. "Albert, we need this. The kids need this." I stayed calm, shaking my head. "We need stability, Kate. Running off to a trip isn't going to fix anything." She stared at me for a moment, then turned away sharply. "Fine," she said over her shoulder. "Suit yourself." That night, I sat in my office, reviewing the evidence Marcus had sent me. The emails, the financial transactions, the photos of her and Jake, it was all there, a damning record of her betrayal. But the real question was how to use it without causing more harm to the kids. As I sifted through the files, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Kate just met with her lawyer again. Looks like she's moving up her timeline." My chest tightened. She was accelerating her plans, which meant I needed to be ready to act. I called my lawyer immediately, laying out everything Marcus had uncovered. "We need to file preemptively," he said. "A motion for joint custody, an injunction to block her from moving the kids, and a formal challenge to her financial claims. If we wait too long, she could blindside you." "What about the offshore accounts?" I asked. "We'll use that as leverage," he replied. "It shows deceit, which will hurt her case. But remember, Albert, you have to stay calm. Don't give her anything she can use against you." The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The battle was nearing its peak, and while I hated what it had come to, I knew I had to see it through. For Ethan. For Lily. For myself. Kate was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop. She barely looked at me as I walked past, her fingers typing furiously. I wondered if she was emailing Jake, making one last move to secure her victory. But this wasn't her game anymore. It was mine now. The pieces were set, and the next move was mine to make. Kate was on edge the entire day. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced with clipped sentences and tight smiles. I noticed her glancing at her phone constantly, her fingers tapping nervously on the counter as she sipped her coffee. She could feel something shifting, even if she didn't know what yet. Meanwhile, I finalized the paperwork with my lawyer. The motion for joint custody and the injunction against her moving the kids out of state were ready to file. Marcus had sent over the latest proof of her financial maneuvers, including a transaction she made just days ago, $5,000 wired to Jake's offshore account. "She's leaving breadcrumbs everywhere," Marcus had said when we spoke earlier. It's reckless, which means she's desperate. Good. Let her be desperate. That evening, as we sat at dinner, Kate tried again to draw me into an argument. Did you forget the milk again? She asked, her tone sharp. I'll grab it tomorrow, I replied calmly, not taking the bait. She sighed loudly, shaking her head. You've been so distracted lately. It's like you don't care about this family anymore. I looked at her, holding her gaze. I care more than you know, I said simply. Her expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, brushing it off. The kids, thankfully, were too engrossed in their conversation about school projects to notice the tension. Later that night, Marcus called again. You might want to sit down for this, he said. What now? I asked, bracing myself. I've got a recording of a phone call between Kate and Jake. They're discussing how to frame you during the custody case, claiming you've been emotionally unstable, that the kids are scared of you. My throat tightened. They're lying, I said through gritted teeth. I know, Marcus replied. And now, so will the court. This recording is gold, Albert. It shows collusion, intent, and outright deceit. He sent me the file, and I listened to it twice, each word hitting me like a hammer. Kate's voice was calm and calculated, outlining exactly how they'd manipulate the narrative. He won't see it coming, she said at one point, her tone almost gleeful. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. She thought she was untouchable, that her plan was airtight. But she didn't realize I'd been building my own case, brick by brick, right under her nose. The next morning, I met with my lawyer to file everything. The evidence Marcus provided, the emails, financial records, and now the recording, was submitted along with our motions. My lawyer assured me we were in a strong position, but the real battle was just beginning. When I got home that evening, Kate was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I walked in, her expression unreadable. How was your day? She asked casually. Productive, I replied, meeting her gaze. She held my stare for a moment, then looked away, her smile tight. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know how close it was. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange sense of calm. The wheels were in motion now, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was just reacting to Kate's moves. I was taking control. I glanced at Ethan's and Lily's bedroom doors down the hall, their soft snores audible in the quiet house. This fight wasn't just about me, it was about them. Kate had underestimated me, but she wouldn't make that mistake again. Because when the storm hit, she'd finally see that I wasn't the man she could destroy. I was the man who would stop her. 2 days after we filed the motions, Kate's demeanor changed. She wasn't as chatty at the breakfast table, and her phone seemed glued to her hand. It was only a matter of time before she found out about the court filings. Sure enough, that afternoon, she stormed into the house, slamming the door behind her. What did you do, Albert? She demanded, her voice shaking with anger. I kept my face neutral, setting down the book I'd been pretending to read. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, she snapped, throwing her bag onto the counter. You filed for custody? And an injunction? You think you can just take control of this? I'm protecting myself, I said calmly. And the kids. Her eyes widened, her fury barely contained. Protecting yourself? From me? Yes, I replied simply. I've seen enough to know what you're planning, Kate. I'm not going to let you destroy everything I've built or use the kids as pawns in whatever game you and Jake think you're playing. She froze for a moment, the mention of Jake catching her off guard. But she recovered quickly, crossing her arms. You don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. Don't I? I asked, standing up and stepping closer. I know about the offshore accounts, Kate. I know about the emails, the fake narrative you've been building, the lies you're preparing to tell the court. And I know about Jake. Her face went pale, but she quickly masked it with anger. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself, I corrected. Something I should have started doing months ago. Kate's lip curled, and for the first time, the facade dropped completely. You don't understand, Albert. You never have. Do you think you're some hero, fighting to keep this family together? You're predictable. That's why this was supposed to be easy. Easy. I repeated, my voice low. You thought ruining me, tearing apart our family, would be easy? She looked away, her jaw tightening. You were never supposed to find out, she muttered. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You know what, Kate? I would have done anything for you. For us. But you threw that away the moment you decided to betray me. And now, you're going to face the consequences. Her eyes flashed with fear for just a moment before she masked it with indignation. The court will see through this, Albert. They'll see you for the controlling, paranoid man you are. Maybe, I said, holding her gaze. But they'll also see the evidence. And something tells me that's going to be hard for you to explain. Her breathing quickened, and for the first time, she seemed unsure. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Without another word, I walked past her and into the garage. I needed space, and I wasn't going to waste another second letting her manipulate the situation. That night, the house was eerily quiet. Kate barely said a word during dinner, and the kids, sensing the tension, kept their voices low. I tucked them into bed like always, reading Lily a story and listening to Ethan talk about his soccer practice. When I finally climbed into bed, Kate was already under the covers, staring at the ceiling. She didn't say a word as I settled in. The silence was heavy, but it didn't bother me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. The battle wasn't over, but the tide was turning. And Kate knew it. The court date came faster than I expected, though the days leading up to it dragged on with unbearable tension. Kate was unusually quiet, her movements careful and calculated, as if she were trying to gauge how much I knew and how far I was willing to go. I kept my composure, focusing on the kids and maintaining a routine that felt as normal as possible for them. On the morning of the hearing, I sat in the living room, tying my tie as Ethan and Lily played in the backyard. Kate came down the stairs dressed sharply, her lawyer by her side. She didn't look at me as they left, but I noticed her grip on her bag was tight. When we arrived at the courthouse, I walked in with my lawyer, a folder of evidence under his arm and confidence in his stride. Kate and Jake were already inside, seated at the opposite end of the room. Jake's presence didn't surprise me. He was as much a part of this as she was, but seeing him there, smirking like he'd already won, sent a rush of anger through me. My lawyer laid everything out: the offshore accounts, the emails, the recording of her and Jake's phone call, and the transactions linking Jake to money siphoned from our shared account. The judge listened intently, his expression hardening as each piece of evidence was presented. Kate's lawyer tried to paint me as paranoid and controlling, claiming that the evidence was taken out of context. But when the recording played, Kate and Jake openly discussing how to manipulate the custody case, the room went silent. Even Kate couldn't hide her shock, her face pale as the words echoed in the courtroom. The judge leaned forward, his voice stern. "Mrs. Harris, do you deny these conversations took place?" Kate stammered, searching for an explanation, but there was nothing she could say. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in my favor. I was granted joint custody of Ethan and Lily, with strict restrictions placed on Kate regarding financial transparency and relocation. The offshore accounts were flagged for further investigation, and Jake's involvement was noted for potential legal action. As we left the courtroom, Kate looked at me, her expression a mixture of anger and desperation. "You think you've won," she hissed under her breath. I stopped and turned to her, meeting her gaze. "This isn't about winning, Kate. This is about protecting my kids from the person you've become." She said nothing, just turned and walked away, Jake trailing behind her. The days that followed were quiet, but filled with a sense of relief. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The kids were adjusting, their smiles slowly returning, though I knew it would take time for the wounds to heal. One evening, as I was tucking Lily into bed, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm glad you stayed, Daddy." Her words hit me harder than I expected, but I smiled and kissed her forehead. "I'll always stay, sweetheart. Always." As I stood in the doorway, watching her drift off to sleep, I realized I'd done what I set out to do. Kate's betrayal had shattered the life I thought I had, but it hadn't broken me. I'd protected what mattered most, my children, and reclaimed my sense of self in the process. And while the scars of her actions would always remain, they were a reminder of my strength, not my weakness. I was free.